we always talk about like, how do you become a trusted talent advisor? Like, you don't always have to just do making placements, but how can you also come in? I mean, part of this might be like RPO type work. I don't know, but there are some things in here. This can be part of your value prop to the clients that you have, is how you can help them leveling up.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenly. Welcome back to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today we've got a great trending topics episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days like today we cover trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. And occasionally you get a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. That's a reminder, if you like the content that we share here on the show, make sure that you subscribe for more. All right, so trending topics, you know what that means. We've got your favorite co-host, Lex Winship, here to get us into the topic of today.
Hey, yeah, I am excited about this one. It's interesting. It's one that I was doing a little bit of research earlier this week, and this jumped out at me. So I'm excited to kind of talk about it between the two of us and hopefully hear something from our audience on what they're thinking about this subject, or if they're thinking about it at all. So without further ado, yeah, the topic today is an interesting hiring trend, which is boomerang hires, which just based on the name alone, you can probably figure out what it means. But the definition of a boomerang hire is an employee who is returning to a former employer. And the reason that we're talking about this is because boomerang hires in general are becoming more common. According to ADP research, in March of this year, they made up 35% of all new hires. And this trend is even more pronounced in information sectors specifically, where nearly 2/3 of new hires were boomerangs in March. So this is crazy to me, like seeing that number of 35% of all new hires, but then 2/3 of those in the information sector. That's a not insignificant amount of people here. So the fact that this was just kind of popping onto my radar for the first time was kind of shocking to me and made me start to wonder, is this something that recruiters are talking about? Is this something that we're kind of incorporating into our strategy, our workflow, etc.? So boomerang hires, the topic du jour.
Yeah. Oh man, so many questions already. All right, is there a certain angle that we want to start off on with this?
So I'll kind of just paint a high level picture of like, what do we need to know about boomerang hires in general? And then we can kind of start to tackle what are some of the considerations here for recruiters? What are the things that we think might make sense for them to consider when they're thinking about boomerangs? Does that sound good? Okay. So first of all, I want to kind of like paint a picture of why boomerang hires are like a benefit to companies in general. I think like one of the most obvious benefits is a boomerang hire, someone who's been at the company before. They're going to get up to speed faster. There's just like less of that like onboarding funk kind of that happens where you've got to get up to speed on how do things work here specifically. That's kind of almost like a non-factor with boomerang hires. They already know the culture. They know the systems, they know the people most of the time, depending on how long they've been gone. So that onboarding experience is much faster. It's much smoother. There's less risk involved. You know, normally during the onboarding process, you have this kind of question of, we think this person is a good fit for our culture, for our people, but we don't know for sure. This is kind of almost vetting them out. With a boomerang, you know that they fit here or that they did at one point. So less onboarding costs, quicker time to productivity, and a little bit less risk around making a bad hire in general. But it's not just about that efficiency. They also often are returning with a fresh perspective. They have maybe a renewed appreciation for the company, having seen that the grass isn't always greener. You know, they've spread their metaphorical wings and have kind of experienced new things. And now they're coming back. They're coming home to mama and papa and they're saying, hey, actually, guys, I appreciate you. I didn't know what I had when I had it.
Yeah, that's a lot of pros there. That's a lot of interest. Do you have this information? I'm curious. These boomerangs in the study, were they coming back and like reapplying? Were they did it say if they were reaching out to like former managers? Were they recruited by the organization? Like, was there any context on that side?
Good question. No, it didn't. The one study that I looked at did not get into the details of how we are kind of getting back in touch, so to speak, with these boomerangs. But that's a really great question. I can do more research on that and come back maybe with a part 2 or put it in the show notes. But yeah, that's a good question.
It's just a different dynamic of, it's like, are they crawling back, so to speak? Or is this like, no, this person was great, let's go get them back because they, like, we didn't pay them enough and they left because, like, some things that I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, two very different approaches and everything in there. So, okay, keep me posted.
Yes, you're getting ahead of us because we definitely will be getting into some of that. We will be touching on some of that. But no, I think it is a good question. The other question that I have that the data didn't show, but that I'm curious about is, what is the average length of time between, what is the time gap between I left the company and now I'm coming back? How, what does that generally look like? Or is there kind of a almost like a calculation that we could use for when someone might be most likely to be ready to come back, that kind of thing? So on the data side, there's not a ton that I have here based off of this one study, but definitely something I'm curious about and want to start to like kind of understand a little bit better.
Okay, fair.
You brought up a really good point though, which is, okay, why did this person leave the company in the first place? Was it because of pay? Was it because of just a great opportunity that they couldn't say no to? So I think that that's a really important thing for us to consider when we're thinking about a boomerang employee is, what were the primary drivers for this employee leaving and what are the primary drivers for them wanting to come back? So were they dissatisfied at company A originally, and that's why they went to company B? Are they dissatisfied at company B now, and that's why they want to come back to company A? Is this, pertaining to just career progression and their opportunity to grow into a new role? Is this about the growth that the company has undergone in the time that they've been gone? And now it just like, maybe they outgrew the company, but now the company has caught up and they're ready to come back. I know several friends who have had situations like that where it's like, okay, I left. I had to experience something new and go somewhere where I could grow and gain new skills. But now as this company that I love, that was such a formative part of my early career, is growing too, I can come back and bring that new perspective, bring those new skills, etc. Personal circumstances are another factor. You mentioned pay. That's obviously a huge driver for why people make career changes in general. Co-working relationships, there's, depending on the number of people who have stuck around at this company, there might be that appeal of like, hey, I want to go back to work with these people. I loved working with them. I haven't found a team like that again. And that can be a huge driver. And on that same vein, maybe the company culture has changed or strengthened in the time that this person has been gone. And that might be something that maybe they're missing at this new company. And they're like, hey, I kind of want to go back and pour myself into this culture again and be a part of that. So lots of reasons for both decisions, essentially.
Mm-hmm. We're going to touch on so much of this. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, as always. Just being able to know this information on both sides, exiting and entering, just make sure you're getting that information.
Yes. Yeah. No, this is definitely something that when we start to talk about strategies for how recruiters can kind of almost factor in boomerangs, we'll touch on that a little bit. But I think processizing this is the hardest part because even though we're seeing an uptick in boomerangs, it's not likely that most of your company is going to be made up of people who have worked here before. So how much weight do we give this topic? How much do we change our process to account for or to allow for a boomerang hire? Those considerations become important. And I think based off of the industry, the sector that you're in, as well as the size of the companies that you're working with, if you are, if you're an in-house recruiter, what is the size of the company and the average turnover? Like, these are things that you need to kind of start to take into consideration when doing the mental calculus of, does it make sense for me to build a like boomerang hire strategy into my workflow? Yeah.
I always wonder the perception too from an agent. So you're an agency recruiter. I'm an in-house hiring manager. If you come back to me with someone that was on my team or at our company 3 years ago, I'm just like, I don't know. I've never experienced this before. Be like, this is what I'm paying you for. Or like, no, actually, Johnny was really good at what he did. Or, Jane was a huge part of our team. I'm so glad that she's coming. I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm excited to hear some stories potentially on anyone who's listening to this if they've experienced some of this.
I know. I'm really curious about that as well, because I do think that's where, again, that processizing is so difficult, because so much of this is almost like based on the person, based on the the specificity of their circumstance of why they left and why they want to come back. And so how do you start to account for that? And I think that's where building process in, and again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but building that process in from the start can start to help a little bit. So basically, let's just paint a picture real quick of what are the implications of a boomerang hire for recruiters. Like, okay, if we're talking about the fact that the market is kind of shifting in this way, and this is becoming more and more of a consideration, what does that mean for recruiters? And I think ultimately, if this trend continues or even just stays the same as it is right now, it's definitely something that recruiters should at least be aware of, so that they can make the decision of, should I incorporate this into my overall strategy, especially if you are working in those sectors where boomerangs are more common, like the information sector. This shift, though, means that you're not just thinking about hiring external talent. You are now thinking about nurturing relationships with former employees, and in some cases, maybe actively encouraging their return. And so again, it's related, but very different from the work that you're already doing, in the sense of, okay, you're still playing this kind of like long-term, long game approach of nurturing, but with a different lens and with a totally different goal in mind, essentially. So with that in mind, now we can kind of shift our focus into strategies and just kind of ideas. As I was thinking about this, like, what if I was a recruiter trying to make a specific play related to boomerangs, like what would that look like? And so I have a couple of ideas. I'll share them, and then we can kind of talk about them, and you can pick them apart and come up with any questions that you might have. And I may or may not have an answer. This is just kind of rough ideas throwing spaghetti at the wall, but yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so the first idea that I had was basically just encouraging companies that you work with, if you are an agency recruiter, to build and nurture an alumni network. This is obviously something that would be easy to do too if you're an in-house recruiter. Build a Slack channel, a LinkedIn group, whatever place makes sense for your business, for the types of employees that work at your company. How do you create almost like a dedicated platform or space for former employees? I have a couple of workplaces that I've worked for in the past that this is not something that the company themselves have done, but rather something that an employee who has left has almost taken on, of like, hey, this is the alumni network of company X. And it's a place where everyone can keep in touch. Everyone can kind of share, not even necessarily jobs related to that company specifically, but hey, I saw this job and I know I've worked with several talented people here before. It becomes almost this community that's very focused on helping each other find your next gig, etc. So if you kind of create that space where people can show up and have those conversations, you have a little bit of an idea of who's looking, what kinds of people are looking for what kinds of jobs. It gives you a little bit of access to information, and also allows you to continue nurturing those relationships in a way that feels very organic and not forced, in my opinion. So that's the first idea.
Okay.
Thoughts?
No, I like it. Yeah, creating that space. So, yeah, the in-house side. And I'm gonna keep going to the agency recruiter side of it. Your recruitment CRM. Excuse me. Anyone that's a client, just go and pull all of them. Like, as long as you've been working with them, just go and get all the information. All of the employees of that company, just dump it into your CRM. Just have that on hand first off, and then just tag it client, so at least you also have that database of them. And I'm not going to get ahead of ourselves, because there's going to be some other things that will pop into this, but that's such an easy, quick one. It's like, in-house HR team or something else, create that community. If you're an agency recruiter though, like, have the hard data on the back end. So, what roles were they, when were they there? You'll know, okay, who did they work for? You can put some of that information in, but yeah, that's an easy one from, if you ever do want to go and pull from it. It's like, okay, not only am I going to source from my database, but I'm going to source my database from this specific client.
Exactly. And again, this is an area where that strategic partnership, talent advisory mindset that we talk about so much comes into play, in the sense of, if you know your clients really well and you know how their business functions and operates, you know what kind of tech they're using, you know the ins and outs of like what does an employee's day-to-day look like here. You can start to make recommendations as to like, where should this community live? What should it look like? Is this a Slack community? These are, people who are in Slack, every single day anyway, or is this maybe a Facebook group where these are, people in in construction or engineering or, whatever it may be, you can start to make those recommendations about where do we build this community and where are we most likely to get the most engagement. So I think that is another piece of the puzzle of just being able to make really strong strategic recommendations that are so specific to the business itself. I keep coming back to this after Dante Nino's episode. I loved that episode in terms of niching down and not just being something that you do in theory, but that you live and breathe. And so I think this is another really great way to live that out.
Yeah. Yep. All right. What's your next idea?
Okay. So speaking of strategy, I think exit interviews in general are something that a lot of companies are doing. I'm sure a lot of recruiters are recommending that the clients that they're working with incorporate these. But I think that a lot of times exit interviews are more of a formality than anything else. And I think that if we started to, especially again at companies where we're at a certain size, we're at a certain level of turnover, we're in a specific industry or segment where we think that this makes sense, starting to structure your exit interviews in a way that shifts the focus just from understanding why someone is leaving to instead having kind of that mindset of is this person a good potential future candidate as well? So again, thinking about it in the same way that you would talk to any candidate who maybe isn't a great fit for the job that you're sourcing for right now, but could be a great fit for a job in the future. This is where you start to kind of, again, have that mindset of, okay, what might it look like for this person to one day return? What are their long-term goals? What, not just in this next step, but what do they see for themselves in the next 5 to 10 years? What are the things that are making them leave right now? And what are they headed towards? I love, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received is make sure that in every decision you make, you're running towards something, not running away from something. And so I think having that ability to almost identify with this person, this employee who's leaving, what are they running away from and what are they running toward, and which one, where do they fall on that side of things, I think can be really important too. And then also just kind of getting a better understanding of, would they recommend this company to others? That starts to give you an idea of their perception of the company in general and kind of their bitterness level, which is a huge factor towards whether they'd want to return or not. So you can start to kind of incorporate these things into an exit interview, especially if you're in-house, but then also as a recommendation, as a recruiter to your clients. How do you make sure that these are not just a formality, but they're actually a strategic tool for identifying and then, again, being able to nurture potential boomerangs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what are you doing with it at the end of the day? And honestly, they aren't as common as you might think. I've been at big companies, small companies. I've seen different ones where sometimes it depends on the role, how senior, not senior, what department it's in, if they will or won't do it. And even if they do, sometimes it is super detailed. Sometimes it's, like you said, it's a formality. You're just there for 15 minutes to go through the motions, so to speak. But so much goodness is in this. So on top of everything,
especially if you're able to create an environment where people feel like they can be truly honest. I think that's the other barrier a lot of the time is when it's just a formality, the other party is often just kind of it was good and I got a great offer, so that's why I'm leaving, and that's all you get.
Vague answers, yeah.
Yeah.
This is where I think I'm gonna keep my agency hat on. Agency recruiters have such a leg up on whether it's the hiring manager, the person's manager, the HR team that's doing the exit interview. You're a third party. If you can create that space, you can get some serious, transparent data around the in-house answer might have been oh, it was a better offer for me. It's I was underpaid and this was a 1.5x increase in salary. Or to be honest, I didn't get along with my manager and I've been following this person on LinkedIn for years and their team has had nothing but great things to say about it. You're not going to get that in the in-house to have that stuff. So that's where we always talk about how do you become a trusted talent advisor? You don't always have to just do making placements, but how can you also come in? I mean, part of this might be RPO type work. I don't know, but there are some things in here that this can be part of your value prop to the clients that you have, is how you can help them leveling up in all of this. And one other related one. So on top of, you've got some great data in here that I would definitely put this in your CRM. This is what we were hinting towards earlier with for future sourcing stuff, why are they leaving? What were they at before? But also we do a scorecard when we hire people. Do a scorecard when they leave. Would I hire this person again? Yes, no. Did they hit their goals consistently? Like, incorporate all that in, because sometimes someone might come back later on and they were a B player. Like, do you want to hire them again? I don't know, but if you don't remember, if you just remember the bad taste in your mouth or that great moment at the the team pizza party where they were the life of the party, there's different things that might cloud that vision. So having some almost like hard-coded data into, aside from maybe sometimes people do like 90-day reviews, annual reviews, things like that, but just that direct question from the hiring manager, from the manager's manager, would you hire this person again? Blah blah blah. Like, that can help tag that in your CRM, but it's simple as that. That's another thing that you can do with it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea. We've talked about the 37 signals hell yeah metric. I think this is another great thing of like, yeah, when they're leaving, would you hire them again? If it's not a hell yeah, then maybe that just instantly means they're not a good candidate for a boomerang. But also, factoring in and accounting for the fact that people grow and they're capable of change. And so I think it is one of those things where it's like, if we're documenting this stuff, we can make even a decision around, is this someone who is like an obvious instant, yes, I want this person back? Is this someone who it's like, okay, there was potential here. They never got to really like live into that fully, but this is someone I'm at least interested in entertaining? Or is this someone where I'm like, yeah, it's probably like short of a miracle, I probably don't want this person coming back.
Yeah. And you see this a lot with like great culture fit people that just seem like they were never quite put in a position to succeed. Like,
yeah,
sometimes those doors open up where, it didn't make sense for them in their career. They had to go and find something else. But if you can like, I can think of countless people that I would do that with time and time again. So
100%.
Like, those are the instances, but yeah, not the people that went scorched earth and blew you all like hard no, hard pass. Do not let them enter the system again.
Like, yes, I left a 1-star Glassdoor review, but I've changed. Okay, you guys have changed. I've changed.
It's not you, it's me. It's me.
Yeah, I love that. I really love the scorecard idea, and it plays really nicely into the final recommendation that I have, which is just proactive sourcing from alumni pools. Again, this is very dependent on company size, how many employees have worked here, in historical data in general, but actively sourcing talent from the alumni network of that company when new roles open up, rather than immediately going to external job boards or starting a search from scratch. That's a tongue twister. This is something where I think that we can start to create a little bit of process around based on the company's openness to boomerangs. If this is a company that's like, yeah, no, we have a lot of internal kind of just like best practices and data, that it would actually be really helpful if we could get some of this old blood back into the mix, because we don't want to have to start training people from scratch. This is something where I think we can start to say, all right, how do we filter to find alumni profiles? How do we match their updated skills and experience with current openings? And then start to, again, nurture these people, start to get a conversation going, et cetera. Even maybe setting up automated alerts for alumni when they meet certain criteria based off of the jobs that you're searching for. So there's a lot that can be done within just this concept of really focusing and honing in on alumni specifically. And then I think the bigger question becomes like, yeah, what are those data points that we want to track for former employees to identify them as a strong boomerang candidate? Is that based off of their performance reviews? Is it based off of their reason for leaving? Or is it based off of skills that they've acquired since they've left? So lots of subjectivity there, I guess, and lots of room for you to kind of create your own algorithm, so to speak, as to what makes a good boomerang, and then how are we going to source and find and like nurture these candidates.
Yeah. And even the next step, where I think an agency recruiter can come and help significantly, is like, what does the interview process look like for these people? Because them from a cultural standpoint for the most part. It's not a completely like net new candidate you've never heard of, but you also there can be a lot of bias in that. So how do you create it where it is still fair? Because you could have 3 different alumni that come in. You're probably going to treat all 3 differently if you don't really have a framework or process for it. So that's something else. So I'd say like agency side, hey, I've done this before. I've helped other companies do it. Like, here's how I would approach when you introduce alumni network candidates into the pool, with net new candidates, with proactively sourced candidates that I'm also giving you. So just having some structure around all of that.
Totally. Okay, I'm going to rapid fire just put out a couple of considerations that I think we've touched on a couple of these, but then just kind of things that we should keep in mind in light of this conversation and that recruiters should consider if they do want to start looking at boomerangs. So first is addressing the elephant in the room, the why did they leave in the first place question. Basically just navigating, again, that question of perception, like how will this candidate be met from the hiring team? How will the fact that they've been here but have left kind of play out? That's something that we can kind of make sure that we consider and factor in, what's changed for you, what's changed for us that would make this potentially a good fit now. The next question is, or the next consideration is competitive intelligence. Like where has this candidate gone in the time that they've left? Is that something that they can like leverage in an ethical way? The information that they've learned going to these other companies, the skills that they've gained, et cetera. The other question that we have to consider here is just getting buy-in around creating a process around this, creating a bit of a strategy around this. Like, again, it depends completely on the industry, the sector, all of that. Like this may or may not make sense for certain companies, but how do we start to build a little bit more of like a formalized Boomerang hiring strategy if it does make sense? And then the final consideration is just, there are bad candidates, bad Boomerangs. And so making sure that we know like not every former employee obviously is a good fit for a return. So how do we make sure that we differentiate between those and avoid rehiring individuals who are low performers, left on negative terms, et cetera? And just what should we be tracking to assess the success of a Boomerang play if we are going to go in that direction? Like, is this retention rates around those Boomerangs now that they're back? Is it performance metrics in general? Is it some kind of culture impact? Like, how do we start to say, actually, Boomerangs are more successful than other hires who are coming in just totally cold? And then we can start to adjust our strategy from there. So again, lots of unknowns here, lots of questions, more than there are answers. But I think these are important things to consider and to start to sift into a little bit, like, does this make sense? And if it does, it could be a huge, huge, huge win.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love it.
I don't know the answer to that question. It's different for everybody.
Why not?
I think it's worth at least, taking out the magic 8 ball and consulting,
Yeah.
Could this work? I don't know.
Magic GPT ball. Dear
Yes.
GPT, should I hire this person? Well, based on a recent Facebook post, oh man.
Honestly,
all right.
yeah.
Not opening that Pandora's box. Anyway, this was a fun one. Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic for a lot of us to be thinking about. So yeah, curious. Anyone who's listening, if you've done this, let us know. If you haven't done it, let us know what you think about if you would apply it in some form or fashion. But yeah, definitely curious to get some stories on it.
Yeah,
So,
and curious if anyone's ever actually thrown a Boomerang. I've never done it. So if you have stories about that as well, please feel free to share.
we do have a lot. Yeah. I'm not going to say what I was just about to say. All right, everyone, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode, but you're not sure where to go next, we do have a link to a similar one, and you can find that within the show notes, within the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website. Full video episodes are available on YouTube. If you ever have questions, send their way, podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, if you enjoyed the episode, please make sure to leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It takes you 3 seconds, but it's going to help other recruiters like you to find us. So, all right, everyone, that's the show. It's another great Trending Topics episode with Lex. Until next time, bye, y'all.